Welcome back to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where you'll find information on what's going on the North Fork of Long Island. We'll be focusing on issues and opportunities going on in the community, as well as people and stories from the present and the past. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 32, we have Daina Reynolds. She's born and raised on the North Fork, and we talked to her about her ancestry and her time growing up and going to school on the North Fork, as well as her time in college, and eventually becoming interested in modeling. So I hope you enjoy episode 32 with Daina Reynolds. This episode was recorded February 27th, 2024. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I've never done this before.
No, it's fine. So I'd like to just start off with an introduction, just where you were born and raised.
Yeah, so hello. I am Daina Reynolds, and I was born on the North Fork in Southampton, but I grew up in Riverhead until about third grade, and my family moved to Mattituck, where I spent the rest of my grade school education.
And so for your ancestry, how far back can you track your ancestry?
Right. So on my dad's side, I think his great-grandparents are originally from Italy. My uncle on that side of my family is very much into ancestry stuff, so most of what I know I have learned through him. And he said that we have roots that go back to Solofra, which is like a southern area in Italy. I've never been there, but he has. And apparently they're known for leather production. I don't know like dates necessarily, but the last name would be Russo. Mm-hmm. And then on my mom's side, I don't know that far back, but I think originally her ancestry is from India, and I believe Kashmir, which is like near the Pakistan border. Mm-hmm. But again, I don't know dates, and I definitely don't have a name for that one.
And do you know when, I guess on your dad's side, do you know when they came over?
So if it was his great-grandparents, that would be, well, my dad would be one generation ahead of me. My grandparents would be two. So 3 or 4 generations maybe before me. I think there's one, someone was maybe born here but like went back and forth. Mm-hmm. So that part I'm not too clear about. But I would say like 3 or 4 generations back were from Italy. My dad tells me this story about someone from our family bringing back this like huge wine corker on like a boat from Italy, mm-hmm. which we actually still have.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's really weird looking. Like you would never see it and be like, oh, that's what it does. Mm-hmm. It's like this huge crane looking thing. But yeah, I don't have super specific details, just like mm-hmm. little stories that kind of got passed down, I guess.
Yeah. And what about on your mom's side? Does she know when, would it be her grandparents or her parents?
So it would probably be, I would say her grandparents, because my mom is originally from Trinidad and Tobago. She's born there. So all of her immediate family is there. And they've told me that I think their grandparents were, at a point in time, I guess, Trinidad and Tobago was having like migrant workers come in to work on sugar cane. Mm-hmm. And they would have been boated over, I guess, from India at some point. But I would love to do a family tree to kind of get more specific.
Mm-hmm.
But that's
That's
the
kind of what
interesting
you...
part of it, yeah, is just kind
Yes.
of the idea of it, I guess.
And then for your parents, you said your mom's from Trinidad and Tobago,
Yes.
and then she came over to the U.S.
Yes. So she moved here in her early 20s.
And did she ever say why she decided to?
Kind of. I think she was just looking so she was in a relationship, and then I think that kind of ended, and she was kind of looking to get away and like maybe perspective and then like a new work path. But I don't think she intended on staying. That was really the big thing, is that she had some family here and ended up staying, but that was not the original plan. I think it was more of like a vacation
Yes.
after that. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And your dad, he grew up
Yes.
in the U.S.
Yeah. My dad is born and raised on Long Island in like Shoreham area.
And I guess, what did they do for a living?
Yeah. So my dad is a mechanic. He actually went to aircraft school. So he worked for Grumman when they were on Long Island. Now he works on boats, and he mostly works for himself. So if you have a boat and you need a repair, you will bring it to him, and he will do a great job. And then my mom started working here as a stenographer. So she went to school here for that. And this was after they met, and she still kind of does that. And just to preface, I guess not everyone knows what a stenographer is, but it's the person, sometimes in a courtroom, but you can practice elsewhere, that keeps a transcript, like a typed record of the conversation. So she works in the courts doing that. And now she also has her own business where instead of going to the job herself, she has like a network of stenographers, videographers, translators, other professionals that she refers for those jobs.
And then they met out on Long Island.
Yeah, my mom worked at a bagel shop at the time when she first got here, and my dad came in as a customer, and that's how they met.
And did your parents say what it was like, or because you said you were born in Southampton, but were they living down there at the time?
They just took me to Southampton Hospital. I guess, no offense to Riverhead, but
Riverhead,
I know. Yeah, for some reason that was just a thing, and I feel like it's kind of still a thing. Like it's close enough where you can go to whatever hospitals in Southampton. But yeah, we did not live there.
You were living in River.
Yes, in Riverhead. Yep.
And do they ever say what it was like at that time? I guess considering Riverhead and the North Fork, or what they thought of the area?
Yeah. So they definitely talk about how much more affordable housing was. They were able to, they lived with my grandparents, my dad's parents, for a little while, and then bought their first house in Riverhead. And then as far as like the area, I think they were told like generally like north of the main road was a better area to be in at that time. I guess that's still the case. We moved from Riverhead in like 2002, and the main reason that they wanted to move was they were looking for just a better school district. I went to Riverhead, like Roanoke, for elementary school, but they felt that the high school was maybe not the best option on the North Fork.
And so how was it like going to school? I guess if you wanted to talk about elementary, middle school, or high school.
Yeah, so I think I don't want to say struggled, but like the first few years are definitely like a transition period. I think anyone that's changed schools feels that way. You're, making new friends. You're saying goodbye to friends that you've known for however many years. I think the younger you do it, maybe the easier it is. Because after the first 2 years, once you start to meet new kids in your class, you find activities and things later in elementary school that you like. You start to kind of get the hang of things. And then it's, it's just...
How old were you when you switched?
I started at Cutchogue East in 3rd grade. That was my first year in the school district.
And through school, were you involved in activities or clubs or sports?
Yes, so I'm a big theater person. Mm-hmm. That was like my main interest, I would say. From that, I kind of found my way into like film in high school, and then even when I wasn't involved in the play, I would help direct the junior high play. I would paint sets. I worked in the lighting booth a couple times. Pretty much anything in that world that I could do, I did. And then for sports, I did softball. Swim team was like out of school. I danced, which was also out of school. And student council classes at the library. I learned to sew at the library. Nice. And yeah, I would say I was pretty involved, but those that I mentioned are definitely the ones that I did the longest.
Did you have a favorite subject? You said you liked theater, but in terms of history or science or math?
Yeah, like the core classes. I would say math probably because that's what I excelled at most. Did not like history.
No.
Just didn't really stick with me. But I would say math, and the other two, English and science, could go here or there.
Yeah. And then did you have any teacher or role model you could think of at that time that was inspiration for you?
I think I always really valued education. My grandma was a teacher, and I just always had like respect for my teachers. I actually had a theater teacher that I really admired, and any math teacher was good. Like it's hard because every year you're influenced by different teachers, and then especially in high school, you don't even get a full day with them. So I think I looked up to them, but I would say my best connections were actually more in my extracurriculars. So like theater or like film, wood shop. Anything that was more, I guess, seemed like not a class. I felt like I had more of an opportunity to bond with my teacher.
And then also, I guess around this time, what did you do for fun on the North Fork? I guess even outside of school on weekends or...
We were outside a lot. I feel like most of my memories are just of my brother and I like just playing in the woods or going to the beach. We would go to Greenport actually quite often. I think that's why I love Greenport so much. I remember coming here on the weekends, going to the carousel, ice cream, the Maritime Festival. At that time, it felt like a far place, and it was always something special that we did. So I have, really fond memories in Greenport, which is where I live now. I don't think I said that yet. And yeah, we would always be at my grandparents' for like Sunday dinner. That was a regular thing that we did. And yeah, I'm a big reader. So if I wasn't outside, probably doing that.
And then so towards the end of high school, did you know what you wanted to do?
Yes and no. I think I knew what I enjoyed doing, but I didn't necessarily make the association that I went to college after high school. I didn't really understand that that was a place to like further pursue the things that you were interested in high school. So I ended up majoring in food science, which I don't regret, but I don't know that I would have like picked it for myself or like saw that as something I would study.
But were you were thinking of that coming out of high school, that was something?
I knew that I wanted to go to college, but I didn't know what I wanted to study. I didn't pick food science until I was kind of halfway through my freshman year. And I think if you had asked me in high school, I would have been like, oh, I'm going to be an actress, which is not necessarily like what your parents want to hear or is something that's like taught to you to be a career.
And for college, were you thinking of staying on Long Island, or did you want to leave Long Island?
I don't know. I mean, my mom definitely took me to see a lot of schools. We applied to a lot of SUNY schools because they're affordable and they're far enough away from home, but not too far. So I definitely saw a lot of schools in the New York State area. I ended up going to Penn State University, which was like a total curveball. My mom actually had me apply there. But I didn't have a specific destination. I just kind of knew that I was ready to not be living at home.
So it wasn't like, because you did apply to SUNY schools, so it wasn't.
Yes, I wasn't like the kid that was like, I really want to live in New York City. That wasn't like my dream. I thought that I would maybe like going to like California, LA, very much again that like acting sort of mindset. But after going to LA on a road trip with a friend, I'm kind of glad that I didn't end up there. So, you have an idea, but you don't know what's going to happen. And then you can't, wish it another way because you have no grounds to make regrets off of that. So.
And so you graduated from Penn State.
Yes.
How was that experience?
It's a big school.
It's one of those like 50, 60,000.
Yes.
And it's like a big campus.
Yes. Coming from a graduating class of like 150 something kids, which mind you was the biggest class out of Mattituck in a long time. I was drowning for my first year, I think, in Penn State. And it taught me a lot because I just was coming from a place where it was easier to make friends when they're right next to you. And I think also the size of Mattituck, like your teachers are much more inclined to like check in on you. And I had to kind of learn those skills. So it was hard. But I think that was part of the reason why I picked it was because of that challenge, not knowingly. But I remember when we went and toured it, one of the girls that led our group had said, you can always make a big school smaller, but you can't make a small school bigger. And that always stuck with me.
You were able to, still navigate through the large classroom size and find a student
Yes,
body.
I graduated on time. I got the hang of it. I think what helped me was making friends with the people on my floor. I actually still keep in touch with almost all of those girls today. Actually, one of them is getting married later this year. One of them got her first house earlier this year, and I've seen them both, or I will see them both at some point this year. So having, pretty much family members there for you in the form of a friendship really is valuable. The mistake I made was not joining any clubs, I think, the first year, because it would have helped me make that big school experience smaller, because the classes that I was taking were very generic since I didn't know what to do yet. And, those class lectures are like 300 kids in there. So, like,
It's almost impossible to.
yeah, if you make a friend in that setting, kudos to you. I just found a spot and sat in it.
Yeah. I mean, most people just, from what I've seen, most people just go to the class and they leave without even looking at or
Yeah,
talking, unless like the professor has you do but that not even in one of those big lecture halls. It has to be in something smaller where they would make you get into a group setting.
absolutely. No, I appreciate you saying that, because it's not really the space to talk to people. Like, you're either listening to the lecture or you're transitioning to the next class. Sometimes you make a friend mostly because you want someone to like work on the homework with or something. You exchange information that way, but it's I don't want to say it's fleeting, but the chances of you finding someone in your major, let alone like in your same building, is very, very rare. So
Yes.
to keep that friendship is a lot more effort than making friends with the people on your floor or a club that you're going to continue to show up to, every
Yes.
week or whatever throughout the year. But once my classes started to get smaller, like my major was not huge, like a business school or anything like that. That made it easier because the class sizes were more normal. It was like 40, 50 kids at most. And then sometimes less than that, like 15, 25, which is more what we know growing up here on the North Fork.
And then so you graduated. What were you kind of thinking of doing after?
So I really honestly wanted to travel, and I wanted to make money traveling, because once you come out of school, it's kind of what you need to do. The quickest way I found to do that was to become a flight attendant. So that's what I did
Oh,
after
wow.
school. And part of the reason that I got that job was, I think, because I had that degree. Part of your position as a flight attendant is to serve the meal, and it was my studies very like food safety orientated. So I think that helped me have like an edge. It's different, and not everyone goes on a plane to like work with food safety. So
Yeah. How was that experience? Kind of, what was that for, more domestic or international?
right. So I was working for Norwegian Airlines, which was flying internationally. I actually moved down to Florida for this job, so I was living there. And they were flying to mostly Europe, but you would essentially be going back and forth between a location in the U.S. that they flew out of and somewhere in Europe. And it was just one flight that you would work, and then you would rest, and then they call it like a leg, and then your next leg would bounce back to the other continent. So you go back and forth. And the schedule is really different. It's not like any other job I've ever worked. You essentially have like, say, 2 weeks that you're working, and then you have like a week off. So it's very on and then very off. So that was a bit of a learning experience. Working on a plane is kind of fun. Like, it definitely makes the flight go by faster.
Yeah.
It's just so weird. It's hard to put into words. I feel like people that have done it really understand it. But the best way I can describe it is kind of, not that you're jet lagged the whole time, but your sleep schedule is kind of all funny.
Because you're working those 2 weeks and then you have a week off, but you're probably all.
It's funny, yeah.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it for the time that I did it. I didn't find it to be a sustainable career choice for me because of how transient it was. But I I definitely got the travel out of my system,
You got
which is
to,
what I wanted. I
you,
saw a lot of places. You get a discount for working with the airline. So when you're off, you still have the opportunity to travel affordably if that's something you want to do. And yeah, again, I made friends there too. One of them I just saw last week. And yeah, I think it's fun. I just
not something you, I mean, not something you wanted to do long term.
it's almost like a restaurant job just in the air. Like that's the culture, I would say.
Yeah, kind of, yeah, like you said, a restaurant and working with customers that are people that are flying and,
Yes, it's a lot of customer service. What I didn't know or think about before working as a flight attendant is that the purpose of a flight attendant actually is not to serve you your meal. They're on the plane in case the plane goes down. It's for emergency situations. You have people that are manning the exits for you and evacuating the plane. So the training for that job is fascinating. You put out fires. You go down those emergency blow up slides. You pull people into rafts. You take a swim test for the exam. Like it's,
so they make you do everything.
oh yeah, it's real.
Wow.
So thank your flight attendant next time you go on a flight because they are there to save your life.
And I mean, you see kind of a lot of stories about just, I don't know if it's something that's happened more. I don't remember it, maybe because I was younger, but as many altercations or stuff that happens in more recently in flight. I don't know if it's after COVID or during COVID, but just more issues and like, oh, well, we had to do an emergency landing because there was someone that wouldn't stop doing something or
Yeah. Luckily, I was no longer with Norwegian by the time COVID happened. But I don't doubt for a second that the pandemic changed that industry. I believe that 100%.
so you finished or you didn't want to be a flight attendant anymore. How, did you come back to the North Fork?
Right. So I was living in Florida and I decided to come back to the North Fork, and I've been here since then. And I think part of that move was because I was getting homesick, all that travel and then living away from home, and just the constant change of that environment. I think I was craving more stability, familiarity, and yeah, no better place to get that than home.
And then so did you get involved? Well, I guess did you get interested in modeling at this time, or were you still just kind of wanting to just come back home and just kind of rest and see what you wanted to do as a future career?
Right. So, two parts, like yes and no. I would say mostly had the idea of just like rest and like reflection in mind when I moved back home. The modeling piece was in the back of my mind. I didn't necessarily pull it out until COVID because that was a period of such like rest and reflection. In high school, a couple times the like idea came up. I think like America's Next Top Model was really popular at that time. You would like hear things from other classmates like, oh, like you should do this sort of thing. And I had someone come up to me in the mall once and like I was too young, and then like an amusement park, like little things where I just wasn't necessarily ready, or I wasn't taking it seriously. Like I thought it was a joke, kind of, to be honest. I didn't see myself as that person. And then it wasn't until COVID happened where I had like the acting thing kind of in my mind from my theater background. And during the pandemic, I saw a lot of people getting scouted for modeling on Instagram because everything was very remote. And I realized that there might be an association between acting and modeling because it's a very like expressive, it's a performing art. Obviously, like you see a still picture and you think it's just a pose, but most of the good pictures that you see are in motion. So that was the period where I actually started to do some research and look into it and allow myself the time to be like, oh, maybe there is like a market here for me. And I wasn't looking at it that way when it was first kind of coming up.
And so that was more, you said kind of over during COVID.
Yeah.
You were thinking about that. And you think, because just that kind of just, you could think about that more because you had more time.
Yes. Yeah.
We had to isolate more during that time, but people could kind of reflect more at that time on what maybe they could change their job, or because people were doing things more remote. But it seems like some people did really change their path at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard for me to believe that you couldn't almost like the way that I viewed that situation was like the world was kind of coming to an end. Like at that point you ask yourself like, okay, if it's over, like what do I have left that I
Really
haven't done yet? You know, like you don't want to leave with any question of what if maybe I could. So it was like a why not, like all cards on the table, like just try it. And I think after that, one thing just kind of led to another, and it's still relatively new for me. Like COVID, it's only 4 years ago now.
Yeah.
So I find that I very much am learning new things about like the industry and kind of where I see myself in it. But I think I was surprised at like the entrepreneurial piece of it, where you do have an opportunity to pivot and make decisions and just kind of, you know, you look at that modeling industry, and for me, I just saw that one fashion model look and I wrote it off based on that. But the more you kind of spend time thinking about whatever it is that you want to do, the more you realize that there's opportunity there that you didn't initially see.
And in terms of, like you mentioned, some of the modeling industry, how did you get started initially with that? Because would you start out as independent or freelance, or would you have to work for an actual modeling agency, or you can kind of do what you want, or start out small?
Yeah.
You know?
So when I first was thinking about it, I really thought that I needed an agent right away. And I really thought that I had to be in like a certain area, like a big city. But for me, and there's, you know, a million ways to go about this. Again, this is kind of like the business piece of it, like make it work for you. I found it to actually be a good thing to start at home because it gave me time to get comfortable and figure out what I needed to do. So I worked freelance, and I, you know, just the biggest thing for me was to just start telling people. And then from that, I realized that I knew more people that were kind of in that world than I thought. And they knew photographers and hair and makeup artists. And, you know, I had friends that were already kind of working these jobs, and, you know, they're your friends and they're willing to help you and to give you a chance. And I was applying to agencies at first because that's how I thought it had to be done. And I wasn't really hearing anything. And, you know, I'm not necessarily young either. Like I'm going to be 30 this year. So there's also like a point where I would get where they would maybe realize that I was like not as young as they thought, or if they saw me online, like I'm also quite petite. So there was always like this point where I like couldn't get past. So I found that working with people that I knew and like building a portfolio actually helped me more than like the traditional route of submitting digitals. So thank you to those people that helped me build a portfolio. I had, a share of pictures that we collaborated on, and that actually helped me get signed. But even from networking and working with photographers, I did find work that way, and I do have a good share of work that comes from Long Island, from friends and people that I worked with on test shoots. But now I have, in addition to the freelance connections that I still keep, I have an agent on Long Island and one in Philadelphia and in the city. And they help me get jobs that are beyond like the local area.
And then just in general, I guess, did you have a different perspective of the modeling industry before you kind of got started? And was it different after you've been in it for a while? Because I've seen like documentaries or movies that might show it in different lights. Like it might be more cutthroat in a certain way where they'll take people that look a certain way, or could be isolating for different people working in that industry. But I guess that might just be biased towards one side. Have you seen like a different perspective in that?
Right. So when I first thought about it, I kind of alluded to this before. Like I very much thought like to be a model was to be a fashion model. What I realized is that there's a lot more opportunities than just to be a fashion model. So I mostly work like commercial work. So my experience is maybe not reflective of like the entire industry, but I have really enjoyed working commercial jobs. That can be anything from like e-commerce to like working for like a bank, like that sort of advertising. I actually found myself working a lot of parts. So like hand modeling has been really consistent for me. And there's a lot of different facets. I've done like even art modeling. Like there's all these different areas that you don't hear about. You always hear about the fashion model and her experiences, but there's this entire industry that doesn't get any recognition. It's like every ad that you see on TV is more or less a model from that modeling industry that's having a completely different experience than the people that you see in those documentaries. So it's a little biased. I can say that I was surprised by that. That would be the biggest takeaway from working in that industry, is I had no idea.
And you've been working for 4 years?
Yeah.
What do you enjoy the most about being a model?
I think like the behind the scenes stuff, like seeing how much goes into your advertisements is mind blowing to me. Working with a creative group of people is really nice. It's not so like structured job setting. There's that element of, trying things and just experimenting, which is always fun. And that business piece of like, I'm an independent contractor. So like, yes, I have an agent, but like my agent technically works for me. Like I say whether or not I want the job. Part of my job is also marketing myself and making sure that I'm, still finding work, keeping track of my spendings and earnings and miles. And I had no idea that was part of it. I didn't know I would like that piece of it. And yeah, I just think the difference in all the different types of jobs, the variety there is just really fun, and that expression piece is also really enjoyable. And I don't know, I just think it's kind of cool. Like, you just have no idea all that you're consuming, and like the hours and like the months of planning that like even go beyond what I see to make one little picture. That like the amount of money that goes into one little picture, it just like makes me think how much money they must get out of it is like mind blowing to me. I'm still very much caught on that.
Yeah, it's definitely, and I think that can be within any advertising, whether it's food or
Yeah.
anything. It's like tons of,
Yes, food and beverage, finances, clothes, like anything, pharmaceutical jobs, huge paying industry. It's like
wow,
absurd.
yeah. And then I guess, what would you say is the toughest part about your job?
The long days, probably. They're usually like a 10-hour day. Sometimes you work a half day, but like a standard full day is 10 hours. It's a long, long shift. And then the amount of time it takes to get paid sometimes is also kind of tough. Like, you will work a job and then not see the money from that job for like a month or two, maybe.
Oh,
Yeah. So there's definitely like a budgeting aspect to it that can be difficult.
kind of, yeah, in preparing for when they might pay you. It's not guaranteed. It's,
Yeah, you can't spend money you don't have.
yeah. And then, so this time you decided to stay on the North Fork through the 4 years. And have you thought about moving somewhere else at the same time, or you feel kind of comfortable?
Yes, I have thought about it. Most of my jobs do come from New York City. I don't think I will move there, only because, for me to commute as often as I have to, it still doesn't make sense for me to move there. If at a point that tipped, maybe I would have a more serious conversation with myself. But I love the North Fork, and I don't think moving to the city would necessarily find me more jobs. It's the commute is not interfering with me getting to a job on time or having an agent or making those connections, because those all kind of happen during the day. But yeah, to be near my family, like both my parents still live here, my grandparents still live here, my relationship is here, my friends are here, my safety net is here. Like, this is also the place that provided me that like support to even try this out. Like, I'm just so loyal in that sense that as much as I can stay here, like I will, because it's my home and I love it.
And you said you're in Greenport now. What attracted you to Greenport, I guess, instead of being in Matituck?
My boyfriend lives here, so we live together. Like I said, I am very fond of Greenport, so I'm really lucky to have the opportunity to live here. And I think my relationship aside, like, I would still love to live here. I totally value being able to walk to the supermarket, to the cafe, to the post office. Like, that's something I didn't get from living in Matituck or anywhere else on the North Fork that I've lived.
It's more walkable.
Yeah, so I would take that in a heartbeat. And I didn't necessarily choose Greenport, but it was a thought, an idea. The way that the opportunity presented itself was more from my relationship, but I'm very happy living here. It's been, I think, like 2 years now.
And as well as being on the North Fork and working, do you have any other hobbies that you do in your spare time?
Yes, I love to cook. That would probably be the thing that I spend the most time doing. But I'm very much into like yoga, Pilates, reading, a journal, and walking, going to the beach if that's a hobby. Yeah, those are probably the main things.
And where do you see yourself in terms of your career 10 years from now?
Hopefully still just like learning and growing. I think any sort of like personal growth and development that comes from your career is what makes it a lifetime pursuit. So I hope whatever I find myself doing, that I am still developing in that sense. And yeah, I think seeing that my parents kind of both have their own businesses, and now that I'm kind of getting a taste of what that's like through my modeling, maybe something more like entrepreneurial. But yeah, 10 years is a long time to chart out.
Yeah, definitely. Was there anything else you wanted to say or discuss?
I think we hit every question that you asked.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, you said, spoiler, I was sent some of these questions beforehand. So this is a little rehearsed, but it did have its side steps that I was not expecting. Yeah, I think we did it all.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come in today and sharing your story. It was really nice to hear.
Cool. Thank you for having me, but also this podcast. I said this to you before we started recording, but I just love how representative you are with the people that you have on your podcast. I think it's a great reflection of Greenport and where we live. And yeah, I hope you continue to find more stories that shape the North Fork.
Thank you so much. Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 32 with Daina Reynolds. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.